Well, Zach, I think I've made a terrible mistake.
Gabe, I really want to know what the mistake is this week. I feel like there's a new one every week when you talk to us.
I do feel like that. And I feel like this week it's because you talked me into getting this really nice camera and it looks lovely, but now I can really see myself and what I look like on camera. And I don't know, man, I think I might need to go back to a much fuzzier version and lower res version.
No, Gabe, I think you look fantastic. And like I said, when I plugged my camera in too, I could see the chrome in my hair. So, good quality cameras. Happy to have you on.
No, it is pretty cool. I'm happy about the high quality camera. And speaking of lovely people that we've got a couple of guests today. So we have Chris from CLTel and Andrea from the Guardian Group. And we are going to get into a conversation today really about, I think, protecting your community was a great way that we sort of framed this up and get into some of the nitty gritty details here. But first, I wanted to, Chris, just talk a little bit about some of our history together. And so, we've known each other for, going on near 10 years. So first of all, just thank you so much for both of you for joining. We really appreciate it. And Chris, man, yeah, it's been a fun history with you and me together, man.
It has. And thank you goes to Calix and you guys, Gabe and Zach, for the opportunity. But we're so thankful to be on. But yeah, it's wild. A decade. It seems like just yesterday.
I know, for real, right? I think neither of us had any children at that point. We were young and carefree and fancy free. But yeah, now we've got serious lives and we're serious adults. I was thinking about this, kind of going back on our history. So we actually go back to like the precursor to the precursor of our engagement cloud product, which is what I myself and Zach work on primarily now. So you were my very, very first customer on a product that we called Navigate way back in the day. And I have to say a huge thank you to you because, for one, I guess putting trust in us to do that together. And it just, that whole thing like started me on this trajectory that I've been on over the last 10 years of my career. And I definitely would not be doing this podcast if it wasn't for you putting the faith in us to do that. So I really got to say thanks for that. And it's been a really fun journey.
Oh, well, I think you're giving too much credit to us. It's been amazing to see the evolution of that whole product line and where it is today and the potential for it even in the future. I love it. And yeah, fun to get to. Yeah.
It's fun to kind of take a little bit of a trip down memory lane there. Huh? Speaking of, I was thinking about, Zach and I always talk food on the podcast because that's just usually what happens. But I was thinking about meal that we had together in Charleston, South Carolina. And Andrea, we're going to have to go to you for your hot take food opinions here in a minute because we can't have a buffering podcast without talking about food. But that is still one of my top 5 meals ever. We went to this place called The Grocery. And I think there were 8 or 10 of us. It wasn't a huge group. And it was so, so good. And I still think about that foie gras butter that was on the plate. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever eaten in my entire life.
I know. I remember it exactly what you're talking about. Rob Johnstone was there. That's the first time I'd met Rob. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a really good meal. Yeah. I know, Zach, it's not Crumble or McDonald's or Chipotle,
I was going to say,
it was pretty solid.
Sounds a bit out of scope for me. Meanwhile, it was funny. I was thinking of one of our colleagues, Carolee here today at Calix, Gabe. I had hamburger hot dish, and I thought, man, Carolee is my go-to hot dish recipe person. I think she'd appreciate this, but a little lower on that list than your meal. It sounds like.
This was definitely highbrow, high quality food, but it was quite good. So Andrea, not to put you on the spot, but hot food takes, any opinions that you got to bring into this conversation here?
I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not a foodie at all. But I did just finally 5 years late get into the sourdough world. So
okay. That's
I'm
cool.
making some progress.
There we go. That works. I'm totally down for that. I have a neighbor who makes sourdough and he'll just text me and be like, there's bread on your porch. And I talk about my neighbors a lot, Zach, too, on the podcast, I feel like, but I have wonderful neighbors. So this same neighbor during COVID, so Andrea, when everybody got into baking sourdough and we were all stuck at home, right? He also got a smoker, and then we also enjoy a good microbrew. So if I bought a 4-pack of, anything, I'd put one on his porch. And if he bought a 4-pack of anything, he put one on my porch. So we started this nice beer exchange. Good neighbors to have, for sure.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Especially with the sourdough bread.
I know I'm late to the game because I had a baby at the beginning of the pandemic. So I was too busy keeping a human alive, couldn't keep the starter alive. So
yeah. Keeping the starter alive is a lot of work. Like I have heard. Yeah, no doubt. Okay. So have you tried sourdough chocolate chip cookies with the sourdough starter? Okay.
We have, and they were excellent. We've also done pancakes that are really good.
Ooh, yeah, okay. I'm definitely a big pancake guy, so I got to try some sourdough pancakes. I might have to steal some starter from my neighbor and see if I can do the sourdough pancakes.
Gabe, what kind of podcast is this? I feel like
we've gone completely off the rails, and now we're just nothing but food
today, which is not atypical. But Gabe, I do kind of want to jump right into our conversation here with Chris and talk about your experience at CLTel and what your company is doing to make an impact on the communities you operate in.
Yeah, so I am the Chief Operating Officer at CLTel. It's a family-owned company. It's been in my family for 130 years, actually, this year.
Wow.
Kind of wild. Yeah, we are headquartered in Clear Lake, Iowa, and serve kind of the north central Iowa area. And our community focus is not something that we have the market cornered on, and I think everyone that's like a community-based BSP shares the same values. But I mean, ultimately, we exist our mission statement is to enable our customers, employees, and communities to lead fulfilled lives and impact the world for good. Doesn't say anything about broadband, fiber, anything like that. That's just one of the ways that we work to accomplish that. But again, I don't think that we have the market cornered on that by any means, but it's why we're here. We just want to help the people that we live with live a better life.
Well, I think what's different though, Chris, is it's easy to put a mission statement together. It's easy to say those things. It's different to actually do the things that you all are doing in the communities to help the people that you serve. And we're going to talk through, I think, a fair amount of that today. And, I don't want to step on stuff for later, but, this isn't necessarily going to be the most fun I know we started off as a fun conversation. We're going to talk about some fairly serious topics today. But that, I think, is a really key difference that I've seen working with you, partnering with you over the years, is that you are really living out that mission statement in the communities that you serve.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and then also joining us here, Andrea, with the Guardian Group. I'd love to hear more about your role today, too, as well.
Yeah, so the Guardian Group, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we work in the counter-trafficking space here in the U.S. And my role with a nonprofit, you wear a zillion hats. So I do our marketing, I run the Operation iFAST program, I do all of our admin work, I do pretty much anything that no one else is doing. So.
And just as a kind of a little bit of history, Andrea, how did you and Chris get connected with each other around the iFAST program specifically?
I'll let Chris tell this story.
Okay. Yeah, go for it, Chris.
So it was the end of 2022. And this is a fun fact that unless you know me, you probably would not know. But I am a military special operations just fanboy. That's the only way that you can describe it. I'm just kind of totally taken by and inspired by that subculture. And there was a former, actually he was still current and still is current special forces guy who had posted something on Instagram about this nonprofit called Guardian Group. And so I kind of, was intrigued and said, Guardian Group, what is that? Sex trafficking. I really had never even looked into it up to that point. But when I did, I kind of went down the rabbit hole and my eyes were open to just the reality of what that looks like for a victim. And especially in America, the fact that the internet is really one of the primary drivers of why it's the fastest growing criminal industry in the world because of the internet. So that fact, plus, being an owner and operator of a broadband service provider, it's like, oh my gosh, our service that is meant for good and does a lot of good is also being used for this really evil thing. We've got to do something, at least something to address it. The fact that Guardian Group finds victims of trafficking online using open source intelligence, surface web, not dark web, just publicly available information to find victims. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, the internet's being used for bad. We have a responsibility to do something. This nonprofit uses the internet to then rescue victims. I should reach out. And so that's what I did. I just sent a blank, out of the blue form submission on their website saying, hey, I'm Chris. Can we collaborate and figure out a way for us to get involved? And, received an email back from a Guardian Group CEO, Jeff Keith, and the conversation kind of started from there. And Andrea and I got linked up and started brainstorming, and a couple years later, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know we're going to get into some of the details around the program, around kind of how people can get involved as well here. But what I love about that story, Chris, and what I think it really speaks, just knowing you a bit, is you don't accept the status quo. Just because something is bad or uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're just going to accept it. And just to get a little bit personal for a moment, this is something that I've seen sort of from afar as well with your family's experience with your daughter. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about your daughter, Adeline, and kind of, how you've gone through this very difficult experience over the past couple of years with her battling cancer, and how you've been able to approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is very much related to why Operation iFAST is here today as well. So now 7-year-old Adeline, our oldest daughter, was 4 years old when she was diagnosed with high-risk acute lymphoblastic leukemia on July 6th of 2022. And as you can imagine, your world kind of flips upside down in an instant. And you go from thinking about whatever else is going on in life to just trying to help your kid live. Yeah. And just so many things in that journey have been really challenging, but at the same time, so many things have been really good. And we can honestly count it as a joy that we've gone through this trial. To that end, this is kind of the central, like if there's one big takeaway from that experience, it's this. I am on the board of a nonprofit called Land of Hope Africa. It's an orphanage in Zambia. And during our quarterly board meetings, we take turns kind of giving a devotional to set the stage for the conversation. And 2 weeks before Adeline was diagnosed, it was my turn to give the devotional. And I chose to talk about kind of two parallel things. The first is a saying from another special operations guy named Jocko Willink, who he has this, he's a retired Navy SEAL, kind of motivational speaker and influencer. And he has this phrase that he's coined, and it is just the word good. Good. And he tells the story better than I can, but long and short of it is anytime something challenging would happen in his SEAL platoon, his guys would come to him and say, "Oh, boss, we got this big problem, training mission got canceled, or, we can't get the gear we need, whatever." He would just say, "Good." He would say, "Good." And it got to the point where they would, even before he could respond, they'd say, "We already know what you're going to say. You can say good." And the reason for that was that no matter what the challenge, there is always something good that can be taken from it. And it's not like ignoring the bad, but it's truly looking and saying, "Oh, training mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get the funding we needed? Good. We can focus and dial in on our fundamentals here." You can always say good. And so I paired that with this scripture that speaks to me. It's James 1:2-4. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." And that was 2 weeks before Adeline was diagnosed with cancer. The thesis was, consider it joy whenever you face trials. I'm sitting in the hospital in Iowa City, and the founder and CEO of the Land of Hope calls me on the phone because he's heard what happened, and he's going to get in the lowdown. And he says, "So how you doing with James 1?" right after Adeline was just diagnosed with cancer. And it was a really hard question, right?
Yeah.
But it was exactly the question that I needed to hear. And that has been like the central calling card throughout this entire journey. And it's just been something that we've relied upon and is absolutely true. We can truly consider it joy. All of that relates to Guardian Group and Operation iFAST because kind of towards the end of that year, when I initially reached out, the reason that I was kind of spurred to action in really wanting to get involved and roll this thing out is there was a lot of pent up kind of just energy and frustration because you're watching your child go through this really difficult thing and you're doing what you can for them, but really there's not that much you can do as a parent. You just want to take the pain away, but you can't. And so, I mean, the timing of all of that, it was like I was able to kind of redirect some of that energy into Operation iFAST. And I don't know that it would have happened had Ad not been diagnosed with cancer, without a doubt. So.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, Chris, and it's just tough to, I appreciate you sharing that. And it gets to a question I want to ask Andrea here in a second too, but it reminds me a lot of this book that I read a while back called The No Complaining Rule. My sister-in-law gave this to me and I loved it because similar to that good, when something bad happens, I try and have this conversation with my kids a lot is we don't have to do something. We get to do something. I get to get up and go to work every day. And I'm very fortunate to do that. There are tons of people that are, living right now that would love to have the job that I have, to love to have, love to just be working in general and cannot. You get to go to school today. You don't have to go to school today. And it gets to that like just mindset shift of, approaching it and tackling something in a much more positive way versus trying to just dwell on the negative. And Andrea, that sort of leads me to the question I wanted to ask you because, as much as that was, that's a heavy conversation for Chris, right? And thinking about that personal experience that he went through with his family, everything that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis through Guardian Group and iFAST, these are heavy conversations. Like, how do you attack that uncomfortable conversation around sex trafficking and make it something where people really want to engage versus, you know what, that's awful. And I just don't even want to engage with it and pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I've been in this space now for a little over 7 years. And anytime I'm in a social setting and people are like, oh, what do you do? If I say anything more than I just work for a nonprofit, I get two reactions. I get the people that they have to get as far away from me as they can. They do not want to accept that this happens. They don't want to hear about it. They want to live in the bubble where they can just ignore it. And then I get like the true crime junkies that want to hear every horror story I know. And I think where like the sweet spot is to survive in this work without burning out is somewhere in the middle of like, I'm not ignoring it. We're not closing our eyes to this, acting like it doesn't exist, but we're also not just like staring at it and admiring it in a way. We're being really strategic and tactical about doing something and focusing on the hope of, hey, we've identified, more victims this quarter than any other year before. And we, at the end of last year, hit just over 1,000 victims since our program began. And that's 1,000 lives we've changed because we didn't just sit still and talk about the problem. And so I think kind of figuring out how to live in that space and not the other two is what makes it possible to do it every day.
Yeah.
Our team also with their military background, they come at it with like a very good approach of taking care of the people here instead of we're just going to work everyone to death. We have, flexible hours and we get out as a team and we debrief some stuff together. So
I'm sure there's got to be like a levity component of this. It's just not, trying to create those moments of levity in your day-to-day work because you are dealing with such a serious thing all of the time. It's like, okay, we need to take a little bit of a step back and have bring some level of sanity back to the day-to-day activities.
Little compartmentalizing going on for sure.
For sure. I'm sure it's, it's similar to, I think about like, I have friends who work in the medical field and things like that, where you're dealing with difficult situations on a day-to-day basis. Yes, there needs to be some compartmentalization that happens there just to be able to survive on a day-to-day basis, right, Chris? I'm sure you saw that when your daughter was going through that challenging experience. doctors that are dealing with kids who are in, life-threatening situations. So thankful there are people out there willing to do that job, but man, that's got to be a tough one.
100%. Yeah. I don't know how they do it. Honestly, I really don't.
I don't know either. I mean, it just I do not have the fortitude for something like that for sure. But I'm thankful every day that there are people that are willing to do it, and to have the conversations that we're having today, I think as well, right? Zach, that's probably a good transition. I know you wanted to ask a little bit more about like the specifics on what the program is, those sorts of things. So I'll kick it over to you, man.
Yeah. So for those listening to the podcast who may not be familiar with the Guardian Group, could you give us a little bit of history of what you do, and then also how people can get involved and support your mission?
Yeah, so Guardian Group was founded in 2010, and we started when our founder and CEO saw trafficking happening in other countries, and he was like, does this happen in the US? I'm going to figure it out. And came back and did the research and realized, yes, it's running rampant in this country. And collectively, our approach is really disjointed and ineffective. And over the years, we've refined our process and figured out where we kind of fill a need. And the need that we fill is law enforcement across the country they're resource constrained. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the time. They oftentimes don't have the open source intelligence training that's necessary to identify victims online. And so we utilize retired military, people from intelligence communities that have spent their career in this OSINT work to take that research burden off of departments across the nation. And so we used to do training in the hotel industry, like back in our kind of starting, and we decided over the years like that wasn't really going anywhere. And in the end of 22, we said, okay, we're going to double down on our victim identification program. We're just going to support law enforcement. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to train anymore. And then Chris emailed us and it was like, and when he emailed us, he didn't specifically ask for anything. He just said, this is the industry I'm in and I think we can do something. And we were like, oh, this is kind of the same concept we were trying to work with the hotels and just got pushed back for years. And Operation iFAST was developed through this collaboration of just like, let's try this, let's try that. Does that work? And it really has been exactly what we intended as part of our mission initially. That's developed beautifully over the last couple of years. But our main goal is to identify victims for law enforcement. That's what we do all day, every day. So.
That's great. And Chris, at the beginning of the podcast, we kind of talked about how your mission is going beyond the network itself. What role does your own staff play in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Operation iFAST model has three components: train, connect, and raise. Training our staff so that we know what to look for as we're physically out and about in the community. So, what specific signs could potentially be, a situation of trafficking happening, so that we can, if we see something, be able to do something about it, report it. I do think it's important to note, we're not monitoring network traffic. This is a physical boots on the ground as we're out and about. If we see something, we're going to say something. But if you think about it, I mean, service industries as a whole, whether it's broadband or, HVAC, plumbing, you name it, all of us have the opportunity to look out for the people that we live with and help kind of have each other's backs. And so that's really what we're asking BSPs across the country to do, is to train your technicians so that we know what to look for, and to say, not in our community, right? I mean, it happens, unfortunately, in rural America, urban America, and everywhere in between. But if we can step in and say, we're going to take ownership of this issue that is in part caused by the service that we provide, we can make a really, really big impact. So that's the first prong, train. The second way that we can step in and help is just the fact that all of us BSPs are community stakeholders and have a position in our communities to be able to connect with local law enforcement and say, hey, there's this nonprofit called Guardian Group. We're really passionate about this issue. Please go to their website and sign up to receive the information that they put together. Oh, and by the way, they also stand ready to assist you if you have, investigative support that you need. but please sign up. So we have the ability to connect. So train is the first prong, connect is the second one. And then third is raising funds and awareness. So again, as a community stakeholder, we have the ability, we have a platform that we can utilize. And so we can raise awareness generally. We can raise awareness for Guardian Group specifically. And then we also have the ability to raise funds. That could be employee matching. That could be corporate donations. That could be raising funds amongst the community. But we have the ability, again, collectively as an industry, to really help Guardian Group expand their reach, to hire more analysts, to cover more of the United States at the same time, and ultimately identify victims for law enforcement to recover. So we have a huge opportunity if we all do it together. If it's just CLTel in Little Clear Lake, great. But the real impact comes when all of us do it together at scale.
Yeah, and Chris, that kind of leads into my next question. And it's for you, but how can other broadband service providers get involved in this program?
Absolutely. So several different ways. Probably the easiest for those who are NTCA members, or even if you're not an NTCA member, ntca.org/iFAST is kind of their landing page. And I will say that NTCA has been a wonderful supporter of the program, and they have a great landing page for people to go to. But you can also go to guardiangroup.org/operation-iFAST, or just going to guardiangroup.org. You can see within the menu how to navigate to the iFAST page. But if you fill in your email on that page, you can receive our toolkit, which was just launched at our time. And humongous thanks goes to Pivot for the heaven and earth that they moved to get that ready for us. They did a pro bono branding campaign. They defined our voice, and they applied our fonts and logo and colors to this toolkit that we had put together. It is a work in progress. That should be noted. Some of it you will go through and read and be like, that sounds like something Chris would write.
Hey, it's all right, man. We're working towards progress, not perfection here, Chris. It's all good.
Exactly.
This program's a little bit like being built as it's going. So it's like someone asked for us for something. We're like, that's a great idea. We'll do that. Let's figure that out.
Well, that's great
awesome.
as well, because I was going to ask you next how you see this program evolving.
Dre, go for it.
Yeah, so I think initially with CLTel, we were just like, all right, let's just take it to Iowa. And then it very quickly went to the NTCA and went national within the ISP industry. And the conversations that we're having now are like, what about our counterparts? What about those in, electric or other utilities or construction? And we're like, yeah, that's where we see it headed is out into all kinds of industries. It doesn't have to stick here. It started here. I think it makes sense in the internet industry, but the reality is like law enforcement and like those of us that are doing our work, we're not going to be invited into these like homes and businesses by people doing this. However, they need their lights on, they need their internet to work. So they're going to invite, utilities in. So that's a way to just kind of have more eyes on the crime in a way that we can't. And so I think that's kind of the end goal is to take it to all of the utilities as a start. I think it's going to try and get there faster than we're ready for it, but let's go.
That's awesome. Well, that's what's so interesting is we talked to Chris about this a little bit, and we've talked to others. Russell from YK Communications, I know, has had this conversation as well. It's a very intimate relationship that a technician, an install and repair technician, has with the customer. They are going into people's homes. And because of that, it creates a really unique opportunity to address a lot of the things that you all have been talking about today. But you're spot on, Andrea. It's like, it doesn't have to stop there, right? I just had some guy in my house yesterday, spraying for bugs and stuff, right? Well, that's, there's another perfect example where you've got somebody in the home who could look for these types of things. So that natural extension into other service industries makes a ton of sense. But to go back to something Chris said a few minutes ago, that tie in between, unfortunately, the internet is the tool that a lot of these predators are using to pull people into the sex trafficking industry, it does seem like a really natural thing of, okay, what can we do to help solve this as well, rather than just, yeah, it's a problem, but we don't know what to do about it.
100%. And to that end, there's a quote that just continues to resonate. It's a JFK quote and some others, but the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing.
It's a great point.
Right?
Yep.
And I mean, like we've talked about, our industry is an industry of good people who know what the right thing to do is. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is something, it is hard to wrap your mind around the fact that this even happens. You can't even like grasp the depths of that. But if you kind of let yourself go there and think about what that would actually be like for a victim, I mean, it makes your blood boil, and you would just want to do anything that you possibly can. And so I don't know, it's been so many people have just gotten this, know.
Well, the reception from, I know you launched this at our time, Chris, and and it seems like the reception has been extremely positive of people signing up. When I say people, I mean other broadband service providers signing on and wanting to go down this path of training their techs and things like that. So certainly, it seems like it's been a great start to what you all have created here.
Thanks, appreciate it.
We actually have our first success story too.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, tell us.
Yeah.
We love success stories.
Yeah, we had sort of like started the program at the Iowa Communications Alliance conference the previous year, and we didn't have the toolkit. We just basically were like, hey, here's this idea. Here's the training. And just last month when we were back at the conference, a GM came up to us and said, I have to tell you guys what happened. I put my techs through the training, and a while back they were in a home doing an install and something was off. Things that they saw in the training were starting to trigger. They brought it back. It ended up getting reported. And long story short, it was a dad he was taking pictures of his 9-year-old daughter and her friends at a sleepover and uploading them. So it wasn't trafficking yet, but it was still child abuse. And now he's been arrested, and he was a prominent member of this tiny community.
Wow,
and
that's wild.
So it can work, and that's the goal of like the more eyes looking for it, the more kids we're going to protect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oof, that's heavy. I mean, but these are the things that, unfortunately you're dealing with every day, right? That's probably like that's probably a tame story in comparison. I would imagine.
It is, but the age will always get you.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the average age that we see is 15. But we didn't see this personally at GG, but federally last year, the youngest victim was 4. I have a 4-year-old. Chris has a 4-year-old. Like, how is that okay? That's the type of stuff that will get you when it's someone just like your own kid.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's 100%. And that's the thing. I have kids very close to Chris's age as well. And so when his daughter was going through the situation we were talking about earlier, that's just what hit me so hard, was thinking about my own child having to go through something like that, and, my own family having to deal with it. And it's again, I love the fact that you guys identified this as a problem, and it wasn't that's a bummer. It's what are we going to do to actually fix it? And what are we going to do to resolve it? And, that speaks volumes to, the character, but also I think the character, Chris, you said this too, right? Like, we have good people in this industry. That's the part that I love working in this industry for the last couple of decades, right? Like, it's just such good people that we get to work with on a day-to-day basis who genuinely want to do the right thing for their communities, not just bringing connectivity into the communities where it hasn't existed before and, doing those sorts of things, but layering on that additional of just genuinely doing good in the community. And this feels like such a natural extension of that.
Well, and I would also say, I mean, Calix is exactly that. Like, you guys, you don't have to take up this issue. This is a hard thing to talk about. You don't have to, have us on your podcast, but you're choosing to. And so you guys are doing exactly the same thing. It's very easy to say, oh, yep, sex trafficking, that's bad. Gonna just move on and not think about that. You want to talk about character, and culture and values in action. It's exactly what Calix is representing through Buffering Podcast and just all the other advocacy and platform that you've provided. So thankful.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And like you said, this isn't a fun conversation, right? It's not like I know we kind of started off joking and things like that, but this is a tough conversation, but it's one that, certainly is important. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to get more involved. Folks that are part of NTCA, if you haven't heard about this, or just any service provider who's listening to this, great opportunity to go to the resources that Chris talked about earlier. We'll drop those links in the show notes as well, just to make sure everybody can find those easily. But I just want to say thank you both to Chris and Andrea. This was it was a great conversation. I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you sharing your perspective and your expertise. And it's certainly been eye-opening for me just going through this conversation with you all as well.
Yes, thank you both. And Chris, one last time, what's the best place for people to learn more about the iFAST program?
Guardiangroup.org, I would say. Wouldn't you say, Dre?
Yeah, it's under our programs. You can find it. So.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.